Story 1. My sister and I told our therapists that our abuser was abusing us. My therapist told the abuser that I told her the abuser was abusing us. We were in that house for another month. It was unpleasant.
I had Child Protective Services called on my stepdad twice. Both times, they interviewed my brother and me right in front of him. Why the fuck will we be truthful in front of the abuser?
The abuser is dead now. The abuser was friends with the judge. Back when she bit it, rumor had it that she didn't have a funeral because it would have broken the state to have that many fucked up people in one place.
I went through this with a medical doctor. I told him I was being abused. He told my parents about my allegation. The abuser was my mother's husband, and that I should be institutionalized because I was supposedly a threat to others. I was only 11. I was stuck with those people until I was 18, and they made sure I didn't see any other doctors after that.
Story 2. Okay, Melissa, let's circle back to our last session and talk some more about your husband and what we can do to fix your marriage. You seem to be avoiding the topic.
Now, Melissa, I know this makes you uncomfortable, but pretending to be a different patient of mine isn't a healthy way to deal with that.
Reminds me of when I was having my first child, and I had an appointment with the consultant. She immediately started talking about this being my third pregnancy, so I corrected her. She looked at her file and said, "So you're not Mrs. Jane Doe?" I confirmed I was not, and she proceeded to try to berate me for not letting her know the file was for a different patient. I told her that unfortunately, I don't possess the ability of X-ray vision. Chuckles, then I promptly left and requested a different consultant. I wasn't trusting the birth of my first child to someone whose ego is so out of whack they can't admit to a simple mistake.
Oh, the fun when the real Melissa turned up the following session. So, you were telling me you tried saucy underwear and the sex chat lines? Chuckles. Her confused look said it all.
Story 3. The therapist was picked by my ex-husband so I could be fixed. We were discussing the incident where my then-husband held me at gunpoint and told me to prepare to meet God, because I was about to. The therapist and my husband agreed this occurred because I wasn't submissive enough. And apparently, I proved it by asking this question. What was I supposed to do? Say, go ahead, honey, pull the trigger if you want to. The therapist said that was exactly what he meant. I had a spirit of witchcraft and wasn't submissive enough, forcing my husband to have to do these things. I walked out and filed for divorce.
Oh my God, do we have the same couples therapist? Mine wasn't at gunpoint, but when I said, I'm not comfortable with the relationships he has with women because he has had affairs in the past. She said, why don't you trust him? Ido. I said, I've known him for 30 years, and you've known him for 30 minutes. We are now divorcing. He had another affair after we saw that couples therapist. Methinks I wasn't overreacting to his relationships with other women.
My therapist pulled something similar. She told me I was basically overreacting to my now ex-husband's threat to kill me, our 2 toddlers, and then himself. Even after I told her about all the other abuse in our marriage that led up to that, including sexual and physical abuse. She opined that I was trying to alienate him from the children, so I could keep them enmeshed in an Oedipal knot. So dangerous malpractice wrapped in a bunch of outdated and discredited Freudian bullshit.
I'm so glad you made it out alive. Were your husband and therapist Jehovah's Witnesses? That's the kind of dangerous, misogynistic bullshit I was taught as a child that rang in my head during my own abusive relationship as an adult.
Story 4. You know, sometimes having sex can heal sexual trauma too. Would you like to try that with a group of faithful men I know?
Okay, there's some awful shit in this thread, but try to recruit me for a sex cult has to be one of the worst.
I am a certified sex therapist and can confirm this person should have been reported to their board.
I've had those before. I nope right out. I also had a COVID denier, and someone who blamed my parents for an abusive relationship with a partner because they should have known. Dude, I lied to them. Exactly how would they know? Mine now is good, although she's out of network, so we're blitzing our way through the rest of EMDR, a movement desensitization and reprocessing, so I could graduate. My reward for completing EMDR is getting to read scientific papers about it. If I learn about it before I'm done, I'll be analyzing the process instead of doing the work.
Story 5. I was 24. Our family dog died the day before one of my therapy sessions, and I was a hot mess. The dog was 11, and I had known her almost half my life. The therapist said, "I don't understand why you're so upset. It's just a dog." I told her that would be my last session, and I never went back to therapy after that. I'm now 40.
This is horrifying. I went to my psychiatrist a week after my family cat died, and she cried with me because she also had a cat pass away recently too. We both just cried and talked about our cats. Maybe it was unprofessional, but it was exactly what I needed at the time. If life ever does get you down again, I promise you there are good ones out there. I'm starting to think there are so few and far between now, though.
It's just is an unhelpful phrase in therapy, no matter what. Dismissing someone's feelings as irrational is kind of the opposite of what therapy should do. Even if someone is incredibly upset over, like, a dead worm on the sidewalk, the goal should be to figure out why the worm is so upsetting to the client and what they can do about it.
I had a friend named Sherry who was married to John. John had a dog from his early teen years, and the dog passed away at 15 while John was in his late 20s. Even though the dog lived with John's parents after John and Sherry got married, and he'd only seen the dog when he went home to visit, the dog was a huge part of John's life growing up. Understandably, John was devastated by the loss, as were his parents. Sherry, who had never owned a dog in her life, was complaining to our group about how ridiculous John was being. She said he needed to get over it and that it was just a dog. Needless to say, the three of us in the friend group, all animal lovers, set Sherry straight in no uncertain terms. It's never just a dog.
Story 6. She told me that since I'm a white woman and my husband is Afro-Indigenous, all the problems in our relationship were completely my fault. Rather than complain about his anger issues, I should take ownership of my responsibility for his generational trauma and accept that I could never really understand him. The sad thing is that he knew he had anger issues and really wanted to work on them. Instead, he sat there, deeply ashamed, while she tore me apart for his abusive behavior. Absolutely awful woman. If you're wondering, yes, we saw someone else. Yes, he got better. It turned out he was suffering from depression, and it was manifesting as anger. Medication really helped. We're still together.
This was professionally irresponsible, unethical, and I hope you know you could have reported her to the licensing board. This is serious incompetence. As you noted, she missed an actual clinical diagnosis because she was pushing her agenda. It's malpractice. I'm sorry, but I'm glad your husband is doing better. That's great to hear.
Thanks. It was extremely strange. I'm of the opinion that she was into him. That's the vibe I picked up. Mostly, it was traumatic for him. He was never physically violent, but his father was, and he said watching her blame me gave him flashbacks to the way people treated his mother. He said it was like she'd turned him into the man he hated most in the world, and he'd become everything he swore he'd never be, and he just couldn't make himself speak. It took him a long time to recover from that. I was angry and offended, but she'd shattered his entire sense of self. He did eventually recover, though.
One of the reasons I don't go to therapy is that everyone I've ever met who went into mental health was one of the craziest people I've met. The girl who went on to become a psychiatrist slept with her best friend's boyfriend for years and married a guy who was cheating on his fiancée. With me first, I didn't know, and then her. She did.
Story 7. While my mom was dying from terminal cancer, I can be your interim mommy. And then, right after my mother died from terminal cancer, it's okay. I'm still your interim mommy. Story 8. When I was in 8th grade, I went to see a post-traumatic stress disorder specialist. I went to our first appointment straight from middle school, still in my uniform. My father had brought me and was in the room when she, and I can't stress it enough, this was the first time meeting this therapist, tried to diagnose me with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder on the spot. Like, she wanted to put it in my records and all with minimal interaction with me. I asked her what made her come to that conclusion. She told me that my shirt being a low-cut V-neck at my age was a clear sign of the need for attention and acting out in a sexual manner. She even said her male receptionist, in his late 50s, maybe made a comment about being able to see so much of my chest. She looked at a 14-year-old girl in her middle school uniform, not low-cut but whatever, and not only told me that a grown man was looking at my body in a derogatory way, but also framed it as if I was the problem. My dad and I cut that off quickly and ended the appointment. Never went back. Now I'm 24, and it turns out I'm autistic, not borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder. Loud and wrong.
It's so alarming how quickly some mental health professionals want to diagnose personality disorders. Thank God for your dad. But also, a school uniform means everyone was wearing it. Considering that seems to be her major reason for the diagnosis. Does that mean your whole school had borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder? I got hit with the borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder dual diagnosis after just 10 minutes following a suicide attempt. The only criterion I met was being suicidal.
I'm a therapist specializing in neurodivergence. Women and those assigned female at birth get misdiagnosed with anxiety, depression, and borderline personality disorder all the time. I've literally diagnosed women in their 60s with autism for the first time, after being diagnosed with just about everything else. Our diagnostic criteria for autism and the general mental image are normed on young, white boys from middle socioeconomic status families. If you're different from that and highly masking, it could take years or decades to get a diagnosis, if ever.
That is so true. I was diagnosed with both ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autism at 39, having spent over 20 years desperately trying to treat my worsening generalized anxiety disorder, talking to literally dozens of mental health experts, and being put on and off at least 6 different SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, in that time. Nobody ever listened to what I was actually saying or tried to help me, because I had the word anxiety put in my medical records as a teenager. So anything that ever happened to me, even demonstrably physiological things, was somehow caused by my anxiety. Anxiety, for a lot of women, is the same as being diagnosed hysterical 150 years ago. Oddly, getting cancer is what has helped me the most in navigating the medical system. Because suddenly all medics in all disciplines are falling over themselves to help me with things, and often things I had before I was diagnosed, because I am somehow legitimized now. Like if I say I am experiencing pain, they actually believe me right away and do something to help me. I guess all I had to do was lose all my hair and nearly die for doctors to listen to me. So that's possibly a pro tip for all you anxious women out there.
Story 9. Therapy is supposed to be a safe space, but some of these comments prove that professional doesn't always mean empathetic. It takes so much courage to go back to therapy after a bad experience like the ones being shared here.
Yeah, it is unfortunately. I don't understand how therapists can be so insensitive about vulnerable people. However, I've formed a theory. These are the kind of people who should stay in college as professors or researchers, because I found that my least empathic therapists were great at theory. She called me a kid who wet their pants because of my love for video games. I was 17 years old by then, but she told me once she used to be a college professor, and she even weaponized her knowledge to shut me up when I wanted to talk. She could talk about Freud on the spot. She knew a lot about the theory. So yeah, please never work with vulnerable people, but stay in your zone if you're going to be this apathetic.
Many modern countries still don't require you to have a license to become a therapist. In my country, Poland, the term therapist is effectively considered a marketing term, and everyone can become one with no qualifications needed. The same is true in a substantial part of Europe. Chuckles, I know a guy who now works as a therapist, with his only education being trade school and woodworking. Even in countries where a license is needed, you can just call yourself a counselor or therapy advisor, and it's officially not considered a breach of law, even if what you do is exactly the same as what a therapist would do. We live in a time when doing therapy is just a lucrative business because so many people struggle with the reality of the world. But the number of people who actually study to be therapists in order to help others is disproportionately low in comparison. I have a background in social sciences, cognitive science. And from my own anecdotal observations, I've only ever met 4 types of psychology and psychotherapy students. Those who went there to understand their own problems without a care for future work. Grifters who think that sitting and listening to others is easy work with high pay. Religious zealots who want to use their position as a therapist to convert people. And those who want to work in marketing or customer experience while steering clear of therapy.
Therapy is trendy right now. Grifters become therapists to capitalize on it.
Story 10. Ha ha ha. Oh God, here we go. I think I have a drinking problem. I might be an alcoholic. What you should do is go to a bar, have 3 drinks, and see if you can cut yourself off. At each bar, do this. What?
I wish I was joking. It took a lot for me to even reach out about it. So I did it with better help to avoid saying it to someone face to face. I was so flabbergasted, I ended up reporting her.
If you still need help, you should try naltrexone. You can get it online without anyone knowing, and it's $297 per month, plus a $50 doctor prescribing fee. It helped me cut down immensely. I've been on it for maybe 2 weeks, and tonight was the first night I didn't drink anything at all, and I didn't even think about wanting to. It's truly a blessing. I wish I would have known about it sooner.
Story 11. That if I just had sex with my now ex-husband whenever he wanted, he wouldn't feel the need to rape me.
If I just give muggers money whenever they want, they won't feel the need to mug me.
Honestly, that's a pretty brilliant legal loophole. It's not rape if you always say yes. Chuckle softly, disclaimer. I am also a sexual assault survivor and cope with dark humor, so please consider this a sarcastic joke made with you, not at you.
I'm a survivor too, and this was unironically my standpoint at the time.
Story 12. Male family therapist. You'd be surprised how many predators there are in safe spaces. My mother, my sisters, and I were in fact not surprised.
Chuckles. I just imagine this being said in not an innocent way, and the session was the safe space he meant.
Story 13. After hearing about my issues surrounding my parents' prioritization of my other siblings and their general apathy toward my struggles, he kept canceling my appointments. He had moved me to a new time, one I had to leave work early to attend, and continued to cancel them. When I complained about this, he basically said that his other patients take priority over me, as I was his newest patient and their issues are more pressing than mine. Did wonders for my self-worth.
Wow, what an ignorant jerk. Emotional neglect in childhood can have profound consequences. Best of luck to you on your journey.
Therapists who are informed and study childhood trauma are key. It's so hard to find a good one. I find Patrick Tian on YouTube to be a great resource. He has a course and other resources as well.
A man goes to a therapist and says, "Doctor, no one ever takes me seriously." The therapist says, "Next in line." Chuckles.
Story 14. She told me that no man would ever want me because I didn't want children. She said, "No man wants a woman who can't give him children."
They should have lost their license for that.
She'll be surprised to learn men can be child-free too, and I say this as a child-free woman who is happily married to one. Sorry you had to deal with such a narrow-minded therapist.
I'm married now to a child-free man, whom I was dating when my therapist told me this, so I know she was wrong.
Story 15. I had one who basically told me that other people have it worse, so I should just suck it up. That cured my depression real fast. That nugget of wisdom. The same guy also double-booked me with another appointment and no-showed on both of us. The other patient thought I was the therapist.
That would have been kind of funny if you'd pretended to be the therapist. Chuckles.
Sounds like they would have been better off.
Story 16. I spent $600 on a psychiatrist who took me off my antidepressants cold turkey. It was bad, and I couldn't afford it. I should have reported her. Story 17. You're so boring. You made me want to officially retire. My wife will be sending you thank you cookies. Hope you like oatmeal raisin. Chuckles.
Does your coworker really like oatmeal raisin cookies by chance? Slight smile.
Unless they were in therapy to work on how boring a person they are.
I would love to be told this by a therapist. Instead, I get that's one of the most fucked up things I've heard in 40 years of practice. And you have so much mental resilience to function in your situation. It inspires me.
Story 18. You can't possibly be autistic. My nephew has autism, and you're nothing like him. This was after I showed her all my charts and graphs comparing myself to literally all the autism symptoms and characteristics. It was really hard for me even to bring it up, and she immediately dismissed me. I never went back to her.
She should have known better as soon as you pulled out your charts and graphs. They evaluated the evidence and are presenting it to me in a logical, fact-based manner. Yep, that's the TISM.
Oh man, I was wondering if something like this would be in here. Mine said nearly the same thing, except another relative of hers who had autism, so she described herself as very educated on the subject. We dove into it pretty deep for a session or two. She was very open about working with me on a diagnosis, if I wanted it. We discussed at length whether the diagnosis was worth it. Suddenly, a couple of weeks later when I met her, she drops that line on me, following it up with, "Even if you were neurodivergent, so what? It's so mild nobody would ever even know. It doesn't matter." All right. I thought I just found the explanation for 30 plus years of confusion and problems while I'm already in a very, very bad spot in life. But I guess I'm crazy for that. This was about a year into seeing her. That was our final session before I called off the rest. I wasn't brave enough to say why.
I had a similar experience with the therapist I was seeing right up until my first autism assessment appointment with a specialist. She told me I wasn't like her autistic clients. I'm very high masking, and everything I was experiencing was purely trauma. Fun fact, I'm autism spectrum disorder level 2, with masking results that put me in the 99th percentile for camouflaging. No wonder I don't seem autistic with all that masking. She tried to talk me out of wasting my money on the assessment, since she was so sure I wasn't on the spectrum. The psychologist I saw for the assessment separated it from many trauma symptoms with her testing and still came to a diagnosis. I'm feeling so much better now, finally structuring my life around managing my sensory overwhelm rather than trying to force myself to toughen up.
Story 19. I had a therapist a while back who, every time I talk about something, he'd just say, "What do you want me to do about this?" Chuckles. I thought that's why I'm seeing you, bro.
I had a doctor who would say the same thing. I'd explain my symptoms and difficulties, and he'd ask, "What do you want me to do about it?" And because I was young, I didn't have the guts to stare him down and say, "Your job."
Story 20. He kept complimenting my body, specifically mentioning my breasts. I was mortified. I told my general practitioner, who was so angry that he immediately crossed him off the list of therapists he recommended. Story 21. I had undiagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and I was telling a therapist on my first visit that I really wanted to listen to people, but I just couldn't. He responded with, "Did you ever think that you could just be an asshole? I wouldn't be diagnosed for another 15 years and self-medicated with opioids during that time to slow my brain down. Thanks for the session." Story 22. He asked me if I could even maintain an erection on our first and only visit to a marriage counselor. Just 10 minutes into the conversation, while he'd been eyeing my wife up. We weren't there to talk about sexual problems. He's also 25 years older than me. For the record, I can, as long as I'm sober.
Sir, we were just trying to process an argument we had over the electricity bill.
I'm sorry about your electric bill, but let's focus on the erection.
Story 23. I poured my heart out about my clinical depression for 40 minutes, and she just looked at me and said, "Have you tried just going for a walk and drinking more water? Thanks, Susan. My chemical imbalance is officially gone. Best $150 I ever spent."
Haha, I tried getting a diagnosis for ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. My doc says, "Nah, you probably just need to exercise more." So my ADHD brain suddenly takes it seriously and starts hyper-focusing on running. Within a year, I ran a full marathon. I visit him again. "Hey doc, I'm in the best shape of my life, but I still have horrible executive dysfunction. Surely it's ADHD, right?" "Nah, he thinks it's sleep apnea. Time for a sleep study." I just stopped going to doctors after that. I don't think I'll ever trust one again.
Obligatory Bob Newhart skit here.
Very similar. My lovely therapist thought I needed to be referred to their depression specialist. I explained that I've been diagnosed with depression for over 20 years and have a good understanding of the condition, treatments, and so on. She nodded sagely and suggested I try taking deep breaths. Yeah, girl, been there. I really want the specialist to know things I don't already know. I also had to mention grief from a close friend's suicide 4 times before she picked up on it. Her response, "Yes, suicide is very hard on friends and family." That was it. Thanks, babe. I actually already know that.
Story 24. I was 17 and a school psychologist told me I was antisocial and that many mass murderers were as well. It has stayed with me for over 50 years. By the way, I haven't gone off the rails yet. Story 25. Scoffs lightly. Do you think you and your husband have trouble communicating because of his limited English skills? My husband is from Guyana, a former English colony, and his first language is English. Story 26. Sweet Mother of God. Y'all, as a therapist, I feel so sad for all of you that have had these experiences. Some therapists are absolute trash and some are worth their weight in gold. Never, ever work with someone with whom you do not share a connection. All of the research says that it is the therapeutic relationship that best determines the outcome. Keep believing and keep seeking. Story 27. Therapist. I don't see why you're so stressed. You should try my job. My response. Maybe you're in the wrong job. Perhaps you should move to a role where sympathy, professionalism, and understanding are not required. Best session I ever had. Felt good after helping them.
Are you sure you didn't say that 2 days later when replaying the situation in the shower? Chuckles.
I was told the same by a medical doctor. He told me I had no right to be stressed because I wasn't studying medicine. I'm sorry, I didn't have the vocation for the only valid career in his eyes.
I did reflect on it soon afterwards and thought I had been quite curt. Some years have passed since then, and it was the right thing to do, since God knows how they would have treated their other clients.
Story 28. I was doing intake with a new therapist and admitted, for the first time in my life, that I had been molested by a neighbor, and was told, that happens sometimes. Story 29. During a Zoom appointment because of COVID, I am doing my dishes, so I won't turn on my camera. Chuckles.
Chuckles. I hope that came with a 50% discount, since you were only getting 50% of their attention.
Story 30. Ooh, I'll go. I was about 23, living in Los Angeles and trying to make it as a performer after college. I saw a psychiatrist who had formerly been head of a large US-based professional organization, so I hoped he would be good. When he asked me what I like to do to bring myself joy, I told him I sing and dance. He said, "Oh, your people are known for that." He meant black people. It was so wild. Surprised.
Well, at least he was upfront with his casual racism, so you didn't have to get blindsided like 12 sessions in or something. Unrelated, but saying, "I like to sing and dance" sounds like a line that signals the start of a musical number. Chuckles.
Story 31. Look, we should never hit our partner, but I'm asking you to sit here and tell her you'll be with her no matter what. Frankly, the fact that you're not able to commit to that makes me wonder whether I can even help you. Story 32. My first ever therapist, when I was 12, told me I looked like an old lady. I had just gotten my hair dyed with green streaks in it. I never forgot this. The audacity.
What old lady has green-dyed hair? Insanity.
Elizabeth Eaton Rosenthal, also known as the Green Lady of Brooklyn.
Story 33. I had an ex try to commit suicide after I broke up with her for cheating on me. The therapist I told this to immediately started telling me about how the client right before me tried to kill herself 6 times, and how he said to her as a joke, "Well, if you can't do it after 6 tries, then clearly you're not trying hard enough." I honestly think the guy was having a mental breakdown. In that session, we discussed how much he hated being a pediatric therapist, how lonely he was, how he's been struggling in the dating scene, so he started resorting to seeing escorts. It was just really bizarre behavior.
Whoa, sounds like you were his therapist.
Story 34. I'm done with you. I was in the psychiatric ward for schizoaffective disorder, depressive type, and had gone mute due to the depression and stress. I've had a fear of heights since I can remember. I had a nightmare where I attempted suicide 3 times by jumping off buildings. I woke up sobbing and she came into my room. The ward psychologist looked at me with disgust and said she was done. And she left, and I never saw her again.
I remember crying on my bed, and one of the nurses threatening to dose me with Thorazine if I didn't calm down. To be fair, I was hysterical simply because I had missed the window allocated for laundry that day and didn't have any clean clothes. But still, it's not like I was violent or anything. So many of those nurses have the strongest reactions to anything even remotely abnormal in those places.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thorazine is so powerful. I took it twice and completely blacked out. My husband said I was wandering around the house and staring at walls. But yeah, I get that nurses and such see a lot and can experience burnout, but I am literally so upset I'm trying to die. Maybe your inconvenience isn't my problem.
While I was in the psych ward, there was this guy around 20 years old, and his brain had been absolutely destroyed by trauma. He would ask me questions like, "What is love?" and stare at me with huge eyes until I gave him some of the snacks I had. Very childlike behavior. And he liked the sound of things falling down, a chair, a game board, whatever. He would just swipe them onto the floor. No dangerous behavior at all. It seemed like a way to release emotional pressure. Whenever he did that, the biggest male nurses would come, hold him in an almost chokehold position, and lock him in his room for hours as a disciplinary action. We started lying to the nurses, telling them it was us who accidentally kicked a chair or threw something down, while hiding the poor guy to protect him.
Story 35. I apologize for the lengthy read, but context is needed. Here's a very abridged version. I have a fairly specialized job with long hours, so even before my kids were born, I traveled for work constantly. When our kids were 2.5 and 6 months old, their mother and I separated. I got injured on the job, and she said I was too much of an inconvenience to visit, but to keep the money coming because she was flying to see her family. I found out that over our 7 years together, she stole $173,000 out of my account that she was connected to. She never loved me. She saw me as an ATM and made sure the kids hated me. I continued traveling because there was no work locally. For 9.5 years, no matter where I was, I drove or flew to spend time with them at least once and often twice a month. I've made the drive from California, from San Francisco down to San Diego, into Las Vegas well over 100 times, and probably 50 to 75 flights from all over the country. So, not perfect, but I made the effort. I did my best to be in their lives, create memories, and financially support them 100%. Even though I legally wasn't required to, because I hoped it would eventually make things easier for me to see my kids. Didn't. She weaponized the kids against me. A few examples. She had my daughter call asking why I didn't go to her daddy-daughter dance the previous day. She forced the kids to talk badly about me in front of her extended family before they could play. Maybe the worst. She told their entire school that I beat her and molested the kids. Obviously, that never happened. This is all from her mouth. I finally got a local job, moved back to Las Vegas, and bought a house close to them. I went to pick them up over my agreed-upon weekend, and the house was empty. For days later, she messaged me saying she had forgotten to mention they moved to North Carolina, but feel free to visit. Things went south from there. I spent time explaining all this to a very highly recommended therapist. After 3 days of basically silence, she looked at me and said, "Do you think your kids hate you because you're an absentee father and just never really made the effort?"
It's not lengthy, but the lack of paragraphs does not make me want to read it. Add those.
Story 36. It was couples therapy. I'm 3 years sober and was discussing my boundary of no drugs in the house. She called me aggressive and authoritative for not letting my partner choose to bring drugs into the house. We also have 3 kids. I walked out of the session and never looked back. Story 37. Oh. This one repeats in my brain daily. So, I had told my new therapist all about how my father molested me. Then I told her about how he sued my mom for custody and made up a bunch of lies about the living situation. I told my therapist that, admittedly, the living situation wasn't the best since my mom was a single mother trying to make ends meet with 2 children and 0 child support being paid and no help outside of that. My father never took US school shopping or anything like that. My therapist had the audacity to tell me that when my father sued my mother for custody, he was just concerned and looking out for my best interests. I was like, "Did you forget that he molested me?" And she told me that didn't matter. He still clearly cares and was trying to protect me. Story 38. During one of our talks, I'd been seeing her for about 6 months. I mentioned how sad I feel for homeless people. She blurts out, "Most of them don't want change or help." I had been homeless due to a mental health crisis about 10 years before this. She didn't know that about me yet. I saw how callous she was toward certain people, and I never went back to her. Story 39. I had a therapist remark on my lips during couples therapy. He literally said, "You have nice lips." Story 40. Hi. Nice to meet you. I'm Jim. Could you start by just filling out these forms? By the way, I know we're just meeting now, but I'm retiring tomorrow, so you may have to go to the main office and figure something else out.
Dude was about to retire, and he was so checked out of his job that he wasn't even paying attention to or remembering the clients he was seeing at that time.
He said, "Nice to meet you. At your fourth meeting?"
Story 41. I took my 13-year-old son to a psychiatrist for an evaluation. At the time, my copay was $260, and that was a lot of money back in the 90s, especially on our measly salaries. But we did it because he was struggling and we needed to get some help. The doctor had him take a couple of tests, maybe 30 minutes, then talked to him for about another 15 minutes, and then told us, my husband needed to teach him how to be a man. Story 42. The psychiatrist didn't molest you. You are only having transference from a previous molestation. The social worker in the same group practice told me. The molestation continued until I was cured. Story 43. Before I had hired them, or maybe after just one session, I emailed about the fact that cost was a barrier. She said, "Sometimes it feels like you can't afford it, but you also have to think whether you can afford not to go to therapy." While not entirely wrong, it felt extremely manipulative, and I immediately looked for someone else. Story 44. A few years after leaving my therapist, he found me on a dating website and tried to message me. When I brought that up, he said, "As long as you can separate that relationship between us, no one will need to know." Story 45. Mine is fairly mild. Reading through the other posts, but you use the word "I" a lot. That seems pretty self-centered. Why do you do that? In an individual therapy session for myself. Story 46. We need to take a look at why you're in love with your roommate. After I'd told her multiple times that this wasn't what was happening and this wasn't what I'm here for. That was the third strike, the third session she'd brought it up, and I walked out the moment she said it. Story 47. My dad died when I was a preteen. My mom's worst traits came out in full force. Think borderline personality disorder, plus complex post-traumatic stress disorder, plus obsessive-compulsive disorder, plus being raised by verbally abusive narcissistic parents. She was worried about me after my dad passed away, so she sent me to a therapist. I ended up talking more about how verbally and emotionally abusive my mom had become than about literally watching my dad die in front of me. It was a relief to have someone to talk to. After just 2 sessions, this therapist thought it would be a great idea to do a joint session with my mom and basically confronted her about everything I had said. My mom deflected and downplayed things, made me seem crazy and attention-seeking. I was screamed at all the way home from the appointment and abused about it for weeks afterward. I was never allowed back to therapy as a minor. I will never forgive that therapist, nor do I understand why she thought that was a good idea. I am in my late 30s now, and I understand far more about my mom's mental illness. Still, I don't think I will ever comprehend why she thought a joint session and confronting my mom would be helpful.
I had a therapist like that. I explained to her that my mother is a helicopter parent who never lets me do anything and is always on my case. She said, "Well, let's have a session with her. Tell her it's mandatory." My mother came, and I basically forgot everything that had ever happened. I could barely say a word, and my mother deflected everything the therapist threw at us. This confrontation was ridiculous, and it certainly did not help anyone. She had quite a few other flaws too. She talked about other clients' cases, waved off some things I said, and told me that if I wanted to be cool, I should give up now because it isn't going to happen. Man, I felt more anxious going to those sessions than literally anything else. I haven't done therapy since.
Story 48. Being trans is just a fashion. People used to be happier when all those things didn't exist yet. Gotta be up there. Needless to say, I switched therapists as getting her to sign the papers I needed to transition was why I went there in the first place.
My wife went to a psychologist before she started her transition, and the psychologist said straight up, "I can already tell you that you're not trans." Luckily, she got a recommendation from a specialist clinic for a much better psychologist. And she's been a lot happier since coming out and starting hormones.
Story 49. I was talking about my trauma with an ex. I'd only been with him for 2 months, and he was my first relationship and kiss at almost 22. This was a year later talking to the therapist. She then said, "Let me see your makeup and your closet." I showed her over video call. Then she said, "You need to wear more makeup, a lot of lipstick, and dress more feminine to attract men." I wasn't dressing like a guy, and I wore makeup. Guess that wasn't enough.
Shit, I've dumped friends who tell me this shit, let alone a therapist. Fuck that.
That is wild. It really makes you wonder how these people earned a degree and haven't been stripped of it yet. This reminds me of something a therapist said to my friend, who is female. He told her she needed to masturbate, that it would relieve her tension. He even suggested using the shower head.
Apparently, the doctor committed suicide. He shot himself in the head in his office. That was what she told me. I actually went to him. This was late 1990s, early 2000s. He prescribed Wellbutrin for me and would give Xanax like they were candy. Luckily, I never took the Xanax, but I did take the Wellbutrin. Fast forward 20 years. I had to have surgery and stop taking it. It would have been nice if he had explained all the side effects instead of me having to find them out through experience. Long story short, I went through 2 years of hell until I made the connection, and now I'm back on the medication. To make matters worse, I'm convinced the surgery was a result of the Wellbutrin as well. For years, I suffered with gastrointestinal issues. It never once dawned on me that the Wellbutrin could have been the cause. Though I can't prove it, it wreaked havoc on my digestive system. Unfortunately, the mental side effects that manifested after I stopped taking it outweighed the physical ones by a long shot. I was so young and naive. I knew nothing about antidepressants or mental health. During that time, doctors were giving them to people to lose weight and quit smoking. Being a little overweight, I thought that was the magic pill. In a way, that was the late 1990s to early 2000s version of what Ozempic has become today.
Story 50. I started with a new therapist and tried him out for a few sessions. We really didn't vibe well. On the third session, though, he started by talking about his vacation. He was visibly drinking a beer and looked a little drunk. That lasted over half the session. Right after that session, I immediately dropped him and found my current therapist, whom I really like and enjoy speaking with. Story 51. I should probably tell you that I'm married. Shortly after we had sex. She was a therapist, but not my therapist.
That's when you reply, I should probably tell you that I have a sexually transmitted disease.
Story 52. Mine is just ghosting me right now, so nothing. The worst thing she said is nothing. Story 53. Checking the clock constantly while I was opening up. That one stung more than any words. Story 54. Before we even got past introductions, she said, "You don't look like you have postpartum depression, so I'm not sure what we're doing here." And then she spent the entire session speaking over me or belittling my feelings. It was like she had never heard of masking, something I excel at. Anyway, she came highly recommended by my obstetrician. First and last visit with that office. And then I struggled for another 6 months before I got the courage to seek help again. Story 55. After asking me about my interests and my personal details, including sexuality, level of sexual activity, and so on, he said, "Wow, so you're just every guy's dream girl then, huh?" I swear I must have blacked out after that because I have zero memory of the rest of the session. Took me years to go back to therapy. Story 56. I'm late to this conversation, but I'm an Asian American woman. After finding an older white female therapist through work and dumping my guts out about my dead mom and lifelong absentee father, she said, "Oh, I heard your people don't express physical affection." Laughing my ass off, I did not go back. Story 57. In my first session, my therapist, an older guy, asked me if I had ever dated someone, if I had ever kissed someone, and if I had ever orgasmed. I was a 17-year-old female seeking help for my anxiety. Story 58. You did it for attention. You're the only one I told about the thing I did because I didn't want to be here anymore. Guess I want attention because I told someone that it didn't work? Story 59. My therapist was angry that I didn't believe in some sort of higher power. It confused the hell out of him that I didn't believe in God, to the point that it upset him. I didn't go back after that. Story 60. My husband and I went to couples counseling because his mom is narcissistic and was having a hard time letting go of her son. She came into our home, lashed out at me, and basically told me I wasn't good enough to marry my now husband. Our therapist said, "Have you ever tried taking her to the theater? She probably just wants you to make her feel special." Exasperated. What the fuck? We didn't go back. Story 61. I was 16, and he told me that my problem was I was just being a princess. It was bipolar depression. I'm 39 now, fully functional and well-adjusted, but I'm still on daily medication. Story 62. Pretend you're a rock floating to the bottom of a lake. I'm here for depression and some anxiety, and I was 14. Thanks for that awful imagery and ridiculous coping mechanism that's obviously not going to work for me personally. I don't know if it's bad advice per se, but it was obvious they hadn't been listening to a thing I said.
Did you get Virginia Woolf's old therapist?
Rocks don't float. So yeah, they will sink to the bottom. I don't like that imagery.
Story 63. I was with my teenage daughter, who is part of the LGBT community, trying to find a good therapist for her. I asked the therapist about her stance on LGBT people, rights, situations, and so on. The therapist got so offended that I would dare question her about that. She scoffed, berated me, and then eventually said she was pro-LGBT and listed her resume as an ally. I felt like I was being shamed for trying to find someone supportive for my daughter. I stood firm that it was an appropriate question, though.
It absolutely was an appropriate question, and please don't let this experience lead you to question that. That therapist may not be accustomed to being asked, especially if you live in a liberal area, but this seems like a really uncalled for reaction to me. You are not questioning her professionalism or training simply by asking, and she should not have taken it that way.
Story 64. In response to a very long explanation about the stress I was facing due to my father's death, everything falling on me, the associated guilt, trauma from seeing it happen, and so on, the therapist said, "Have you thought about planting a tree or purchasing a bench in a park to memorialize your father? Bitch, I just told you I'm drowning, and you want me to do one more thing? Are you serious?" That was our last session. I never got proper grief counseling, and I'm still dealing with a tremendous amount of guilt and resentment today. Yay me.
I know it's just a stranger on the internet who doesn't know anything about your life. But in case it helps, dealing with the death of a parent is incredibly difficult, and no one can handle it perfectly. I don't know the specifics of what you went through, but I do know that there was no way to handle it well. Handling everything and shouldering that responsibility during what might be the hardest time of your life is enough to send anyone into a bad place, and you deserve respect for making it through. Good luck with everything, and I hope you can make peace with it. Whatever happened, you don't deserve to live with constant guilt and resentment. No one does.
Story 65. Sometimes you just have to fake it till you make it, and not everyone is cut out to raise kids. I was deep in the postpartum trenches. Story 66. Fuck me. I thought my therapist was bad. Haha. These people are truly the cunts of humanity. Story 67. Today I learned that there are a lot of seriously messed up therapists out there who should have their licenses removed. Story 68. Second session. Speaking of my dad, laughed saying, "It's so narcissistic it's autistic," and then laughed again. Story 69. I was 6 and very depressed. I have a whole year of my life that I don't remember, and I just stopped talking. I have some theories. My mom took me to a child psychologist who said to me, "You are perfectly fine. I think you just enjoy making your mom feel like garbage." Story 70. I saw her for the first time in months. I'd been avoiding making an appointment because I'd relapsed and didn't want to admit it. Well, at this first appointment back, I was honest about all of it, and she told me that she was mad at me for ghosting her. It made her feel bad that I didn't trust her enough to tell her I had been struggling. Story 71. I was in a really dark time in my life, and I went back to counseling to help me not end myself. I'm a veterinarian. She asked me a veterinary medicine question about her own animal. Story 72. Get the fuck over it. I was a suicidal teenager, fresh from an attempt. I was diagnosed with BPD, borderline personality disorder, and having really big emotions. Being told, get the fuck over it, over and over again was really not cool. I left and never came back. Story 73. After the death of my mother, I decided to see a therapist to help me get through the grief and the sudden overwhelming nihilism about the meaninglessness of life. We had quite a few sessions, and I talked about my home life as well as my relationship with my wife. After everything, he suggested that my wife and I have a child. Children can renew a person's view on life. I was polite and just said, yeah, I guess. I texted him a week later that I was cured and thanked him for hearing me out.
A therapist I was seeing for anxiety and panic attacks gave me the same advice. Told me I was lonely and that I should have a child. I told her that it seems selfish to have a child to fix yourself. She just said, no, it's not. You should have a kid. What the fuck?
Technically, he's not wrong. They can entirely change your perspective on things. But that's an absolutely wild and out-of-pocket suggestion. And definitely not something to do for the reason of therapy. Because you'll need a lot more once they're here.
Oh, agreed. I know kids change people's perspectives, but I'm not sure I want one when I'm in the middle of a mental crisis.
Story 74. Chuckles softly as a therapist. This is simultaneously a huge ego boost and also horrifying how many bad examples there are. I have no idea how these people get clients, let alone a license. Story 75. Do you believe in God? Problems like this are easier to handle when you have faith. I can recommend some churches.
I'm an atheist therapist, and goddamn it, this pisses me off. It's unethical and reportable.
Story 76. I was suicidally depressed and having suicidal ideation. He asked how I do it. I told him I was planning to cut the carotid artery. He rolled his eyes and said, yeah, show me where the carotid is. I pointed to it and he said, bullshit, you won't. Story 77. First and only session with a therapist. Spent an hour talking about the abuse my ex put me through, only for her to say, sounds like you need some closure. Maybe you should call him to talk about it. Story 78. You aren't autistic. You are just having a midlife crisis. 6 months later, I was diagnosed with autism. Story 79. I brought my problematic mother to therapy with me. She loved dressing up. She wore her red sexy dress. My therapist kept switching his legs. I wanted to ask if he'd like to go to the restroom. We'll wait. The same therapist before that said, after I told him I'm lesbian, I'm Catholic. I'm not going to talk about that. And all you want to do is complain. I called 911 on my mother. The dispatcher said only call for emergencies or you'd get fined. Story 80. Anxiety is good. It's your body's natural way to warn of danger. I would hate to live without anxiety. Story 81. I was 16 and reeling from the mental effects of severe bullying. When I referred to it as something that I had survived, my therapist nearly burst out laughing. Around this time, she told me that she had heard of things that are truly terrifying and that what happened to me wasn't that bad. Even when I said that everyone responds to situations differently, she shook her head, smiling, and said she knows, but it's still not that bad. Meanwhile, I'm still dealing with the mental effects a decade after the bullying. It's taken a lot to be able to open up to a therapist again. Story 82. Content warning. Sexual assault. After telling her my husband had done this to me, she said, are you sure? That nice man. Later, it came out that he had hurt others in our family. I've never forgiven myself for not speaking up sooner, though the therapist obviously did not help. Story 83. I think I've had the worst luck with therapists. Here are some golden comments I've received. Number 1, my most recent therapist, my 4th one. I told him about how my parents' health is declining since I told them about my childhood sexual assault trauma. The guy said I made a mistake, that I should never have told anyone, and should have confronted my assaulter in front of the whole family so they learned a lesson. Because that's how he dealt with his sexual assault trauma, and according to him, it's the only and best way. I hate him so much. Number 2, first therapist of my life. Never took any notes. asked me the same questions, asked me to repeat myself, and acted surprised when I narrated the same thing for the third time, as if she heard it for the first time. I felt like whatever I was saying was not important. Number 3. Somehow I still gathered courage to go to my second therapist. She got mad at me because I was taking more time to heal with EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing. In her words, most of my patients heal in 3 to 5 taps. It's been 10 taps for you. What's wrong with you? I didn't know I could do therapy wrong, but I felt like I did. Number 4. Third therapist. Again, after a lot of courage, I gave therapy another chance. But she used to look at the clock and smile or laugh at my concerns about internalized guilt and shame. I felt even more ashamed after. Still in search of a decent therapist in India. If anyone has any leads, please let me know. Story 84. Not as intense as the other comments, but when I was a kid, I had a lot of existential fears, fear of death, and derealization issues. I still do, but not as bad, thankfully. I'd been seeing a therapist for a little while about it, and during one session, she asked me, well, what if everything isn't real? What would you do? Would it be that bad? I was in a spiral for months after and begged to never go back. Laughs lightly. Story 85. My therapist of 6 years disclosed that he was being federally charged for sex crimes involving children. He denied it and gave a bunch of explanations. I read the affidavit and have been following the case, and he ended up pleading guilty and is about to be sentenced to 10 to 15 years. They found over 500 images and videos on his computer, including ones of infant and toddler abuse. Story 86. I was explaining that my ADHD makes it so the only time I can actually do my work is in a state of last-minute panic. And she said, why can't that just be your method? I said, I hate living my life this way, and I don't want all the negative health effects that type of stress generates. Are you nuts? I'm here because I want to learn how to do my work when it's convenient for me, not when I'm ready to jump out a window.
Executed properly, this can be great advice. I was explaining that my ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, makes it so that any new skill only holds my attention long enough for me to get the basics. So I'm okay at a lot of things, but not really an expert at anything. My therapist said, why can't you just be a jack of all trades? And damn, if that didn't change some things for me.
Story 87. Holy smokes, I feel so fortunate to have done well with my first and only therapist, based on some of these replies. Story 88. She initially dismissed my anxiety and panic attacks as attention-seeking behavior. It wasn't until I failed a suicide attempt that she started taking my anxiety and panic attacks seriously. By that point, I had moved on to another therapist with more experience. Story 89. I know it's a legitimate aspect of cognitive behavioral therapy and is evidence-based. But when it was recommended that I worry at certain times, called worry time, chuckles, I laughed in his face.
But did he give you the actual method of doing that? Or did he just leave you to figure out? Because without properly explaining it, it totally makes sense why it would sound ridiculous.
He handed me a printout from the internet that I could have Googled.
Story 90. I confessed the feelings I had developed for a classmate who was already in a serious relationship, and how I processed them into platonic ones, as I wanted to be her friend for the same reasons I had developed those feelings anyway. My old therapist straight up told me that I'd never know, and that I could wait it out, wait it out to see if her private life's misfortunes would benefit me in the long run. Sociopathic, if you'd ask me. She, the therapist, and these episodes almost made me believe my life was a Hollywood flick or something. Now that AI chatbots have come along, I think back on it, and it's literally the same thing with using AI as therapists. They'll feed any and all delusions if you let them. Very counterproductive for, therapy. Story 91. Just try not to think about it so much. Like, wow, thanks. I never considered simply turning my brain off like a light switch. Story 92. These comments are why I don't care for therapists. I went to several, and they all made me either feel worse or no better. It all changed when I went to a licensed psychologist and went through evidence-based cognitive behavioral therapy.
I think a lot of people use the words therapist, counselor, psychologist interchangeably, so that can get confusing.
Story 93. As a trainee counselor who's about to start placement, these comments are wild. How did these people manage to become therapists?
This is the issue. It is not a regulated profession, so people can just pretend and attract desperate people who won't question it. It is so dangerous and damaging. No idea why this comment and my previous one are getting downvoted.